News just in, influential conservative Christian broadcaster Pat Robertson has died. He was 93 years old. Let's take a look back at his life with our Stephanie Elam.
Lord God, fill me now with your spirit.
Pat Robertson was a seminal figure of the religious right. He founded the Christian Broadcasting Network, the political advocacy group, the Christian Coalition, and the Christian College Regent University. But he was also known for his outspoken views on homosexuality, feminism, and a host of other hot-button issues.
There isn't one single civilization that has survived that had openly embraced homosexuality.
In 2001, he agreed with fellow televangelist Jerry Falwell that God allowed the 9/11 terrorists to succeed because America had moved to the left and removed religion from the mainstream.
I totally concur.
The Yale Law School graduate and Korean War vet had a religious awakening in the late 1950s. He bought a bankrupt local station in Portsmouth, Virginia, and it became the first outlet for the Christian Broadcast Network. It was the first Christian TV network in the U.S. and became one of the world's largest TV ministries. Its flagship program was The Daily Show he hosted, The 700 Club, named for the 700 donors who launched it in 1961.
I plan to make a formal announcement of my candidacy for the Republican nomination for the presidency of the United States.
Robertson, whose father was a congressman and U.S. senator, ran as a Republican presidential candidate in 1988. He came in second in the Iowa caucus, but his campaign didn't fare as well in other primary states. He dropped out of the race and returned to hosting the 700 Club, where he famously made bold predictions that didn't always come true.
Romney will win the election.
You believe that?
I absolutely believe.
What makes you believe that?
Because the Lord told me.
Pat Robertson, a key founder of the conservative Christian movement, who never shied away from expressing his views, no matter how controversial they might be.
It is Thursday, 8 June, year of our Lord 2023. Dr. Pat Robertson died earlier in the morning. Two giants of the Christian right, that was Dr. Pat Robertson and Jerry Falwell. Both were institution builders. Jerry Falwell has Liberty University, this great university down in Lynchburg, Virginia, and Dr. Pat Robertson in Virginia Beach, Virginia, Regent University. I think the Commonwealth of Virginia very proud. The two sons of the Commonwealth left these great, powerful institutions. And, you know, the mainstream media mocks Jerry Falwell, mocks Dr. Pat Robertson, but you look at a lot of the predictions they made, particularly as society spins more and more and more out of control. And I got to tell you, it's absolutely stunning. But American patriots are stepping up. The Moms for Liberty have just been designated an anti-government group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. You saw the fathers in the Armenian fathers in Glendale, California, threw down hard against Antifa the other day about this LGBTQ material in the libraries and in the teaching program, or what they feel is propaganda and grooming. People have had a belly full of it. And I got to tell you, we owe a lot. This country owes a lot to Dr. Pat Robertson and, of course, to Jerry Falwell. And for the people at Regent University, our thoughts and prayers go out to you as you're going to commemorate the death of your founder and a true visionary, Dr. Pat Robertson. I got to tell you, the 700 Club, you compare the news on 700 Club to about the news anywhere. And it was pound for pound as good as anything. To show you that fight is far from over. In fact, it's more insane than it's ever been. Walter O'Malley, another institution builder, the founder of the Brooklyn Dodgers and the owner of the Brooklyn Dodgers, moved to Los Angeles took that legendary franchise and went to Los Angeles. And just Chavez Ravine Dodger Stadium, a fun place, always with Vin Scully, the announcer, with great players like Sandy Koufax and Don Drysdale and what the great teams they had, always family oriented. When you went to Dodger Stadium, it was always about families. A beautiful park, totally open. In fact, it's interesting. The three oldest parks in baseball are Fenway Park, Wrigley Field, and now Dodger Stadium, right? Since Yankee Stadium got torn down, the original Yankee Stadium, or the second Yankee Stadium got torn down, Chavez Ravine is the third oldest baseball stadium. What is happening there and what the Dodger management has agreed to for this Pride Month is shocking. I want to bring in John Yep, who runs a Catholic group that's organizing this march. Tell us first what the Dodgers created to. What's going to take place, I think, on the 16th of June in this rally that you're putting, this march and rally you're putting together.
June 16th is the day that the LA Dodgers will honor the Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. They're a group that openly mocks our Lord with horrible sexual imagery during their quote unquote shows. They blaspheme, the largest voter bloc in the nation, specifically Christians and Catholics, and they are being honored on June 16th, which is very significant. Remember, they were invited. Catholic Vote led the way. They pushed back on them, and they rescinded the invitation. And then what we saw, kind of with the same thing with the Target, how 200 LGBT groups just recently signed a petition demanding that they reinstate the clothing in the stores. They've been fighting back. So they did fight back. They got it back on the schedule. It's June 16th. But as they're fighting back, so are we. So we have a number of groups that have come together. And what's important to understand, too, it's not just Christian groups. I mean, there's Jewish groups that are coming to a right because they recognize this is not just a Catholic issue. This is an American issue. You assault on our religion, that's no bueno. That is not cool. And to stand by and do nothing shows you're complicit with your silence. So June 16th, it is a prayerful procession. We have some big names coming. Some are under wraps. We could say that Bishop Joseph Strickland, the Diocese of Tyler, Texas, a warrior, a courageous man, will be there on the ground to lead us in prayer.
Bishop Strickland is renowned throughout the Catholic world for traditional Catholics. How have you pulled this together? And is the archdiocese, I imagine the largest archdiocese in the country, has to be giving you tremendous support and backing for this endeavor, sir?
So our reps met with the LA Police Department, and there was some other Protestant members there as well. So they had their meeting. They were going over their plans. We informed them that we had a Catholic bishop with us. They were like, "Wow, this is amazing." So you're going to have an event at the cathedral, we assume, right? To which we responded, "No." They looked at us like, "Come again? It's your Catholic church right down the road. They're not going to support you." For better or for worse, it's the largest archdiocese in the country. They have made a decision that, they would prefer just to be neutral, which, there are a lot of good people in the diocese. I don't understand that decision at all. I think that neutrality at this point is a decision for the other side. If you're silent now, you're part of the problem. So they will not.
Hold on. Hang on. I can't understand this. Captain Bannon, Maureen Bannon, went to American Martyrs and then to Marymount. She's a product of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. The Archdiocese of Los Angeles is the largest, the most powerful, and the wealthiest archdiocese in this country. Right? It's got everybody from Hollywood stars to working class people, to tons of devout Hispanics, multinational, multi-ethnic. It's a very powerful and vibrant archdiocese. The Sisters of Perpetual, these are a group that's primary focus is the mocking of Catholic traditions and Catholic icons in the Catholic Mass and our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. You cannot be neutral on this. And particularly if you're the official organization of the Catholic Church. So you can't tell me, John Yep, that the Archdiocese of Los Angeles is not going to be fully supportive of this parade. In fact, I'm surprised that the cardinal out there is not leading the parade, sir.
For whatever reason, it's not happening. We're in shock. We're respectfully begging that he come and just be present or release a statement, personally, like, I'm supporting this. I mean, we're talking about baseball here, right? This is an opportunity. This is like a slow pitch for the Americans, specifically Catholics, to come together and to hit this baby out of the park. It's a home run. I mean, it could be a grand slam, and we are walking away from an opportunity to make a statement. There's a reason that they have come to Los Angeles, Sisters of Perpetual Indulgence. They're testing us. They're testing us to see how far we're going to go. They tested the drinkers of Bud Light. They tested the moms at Target. They all pushed back. They're testing the Catholics now. What are we going to do? It's not enough to sit back and do nothing here at this point. You mentioned, Steve, you brought up the parish you mentioned was, sorry, go ahead.
No, tell me about American Martyrs. Tell me about it.
And American Martyrs, one of the biggest parishes in the country. What's it named after? The North American Martyrs, St. Isaac Joe, St. John the Baptist. Those were the courageous Jesuits back in the day, the real Jesuits who went to North America and worked with the Indians. And they had some of the most heroic martyrdom in witness to their faith. We need martyrs now, today, more than ever.
Well, we need witness to the faith. By me being neutral, you've made a decision. If you're neutral, you're backing the perverts. Let me be blunt. For the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, we are not going to let this go lightly. You're on notice. If you are not backing this parade, if they don't have a mass at the cathedral, if there's not an embrace of Catholics, Christians, Jews coming together to stop the mockery of the Blessed Sacrament, the Holy Mass, our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ, the Catholic Church, nuns, right? You must stand, particularly given your track record, no offense, given your track record, given the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, horrific track record on pedophile priests. Let's be blunt. Let's talk about truth. The horrible track record you have had about pedophile priests, you must stand up and stand united, particularly with a holy man like Bishop Strickland, renowned throughout the country as a good and holy man.
Pray for that man.
And the people that I've seen that are go ahead, John.
I had just a quick phone call with him today just to kind of go over details of the event. That man is courageous. He's following his conscience. He says, I'm just from Tyler, Texas. I'm going to Los Angeles to be there to pray. I mean, at this point in the ball game, we've got to get behind the people who are bold enough to step out and be and lead, not judge, arrest, fine, whatever. But we're moving on. Like it's time. Think I know a lot of nuns, so do you, Steve. The nuns are like, what? They're mocking our vocation, us who've given our lives to serve the Lord, and you're not even going to defend us? I mean, what does that say to them?
Anybody in this country, we'll play some footage tomorrow, anybody in this country that has had the blessing of had these great Catholic nuns that have given their entire lives in the hospitals, given their entire lives in these schools, to have them mocked is unacceptable. The Archdiocese of Los Angeles is very clear. To be neutral is to make a decision to back the perversion, okay? Given your track record on, to be blunt, backing perversion in the past, it's now time for you to step up. And if you don't step up, there's going to be consequences. There will be consequences delivered by the war room. This is not acceptable. And you're cowards, and you're not going to hide behind this. We're going to expose you by name. You cannot hide. So, John Yep, thank you very much. Honor to have you, John. How can people get to the to the site?
The latest information, especially for parking, which is we're constantly updating with new information, is the letter C, FORC.com. There you can find where to go, what time it starts. It's June 16th, 4:30, Lot 13, there in outside LA Dodger Stadium.
Okay, so one more time, where do they go? I want to make sure everybody's got a chance to go to your site. We want a huge turnout, particularly the war room. Yep.
The letter
go ahead.
CFORC.com. CFOR.com. You'll find it there, or just Google Catholics for Catholics, and the information will be there for the march.
Okay, brother, thank you very much. Honored to have you on here. Look forward to really getting people out there. And the Archdiocese of Los Angeles, understand something. You cannot hide. Think about it. What he said, American Martyrs. Think of the Jesuits that gave their lives in trying to bring the word of the living Christ to the native population, to the Indians, and gave their life. It's time for the gutless cowards to gutless Catholics either got to step up or get out of the way. You shouldn't have control of the apparatus of the Archdiocese of Los Angeles. It's a disgrace. Phillip Patrick. If I wanted to get Phillip on here for a while. Phillip, brother, we go from the sublime to the less sublime. We're going to talk about gold. But here's where we're going to talk about gold. Phillip, I had to have you on today. And I wanted to let the audience know I do not write the headlines for the Financial Times of London. I understand they watch the War Room and they may draft off the War Room every now and again, but as people know, it's the paper that I start the day with every day because it is the tip sheet of the global elite. But Phillip, today, U.S. Treasury's $1 trillion borrowing spree set to increase strain on bank system. If I can just do that, Memphis can just show that. Phillip, that says it all, brother. The Republican McCarthy and these hapless clowns give Biden a complete blank check. And people say, well, Steve, it's the reason it's all backed up. You guys wouldn't let them increase the debt ceiling. That's why it's all backed up. They have plenty of cash. This could be managed. But what we're trying to say is that we're at $31.5 trillion now. I don't know, Phillip, by August 1st, we'll be another trillion plus. We'll be at $32.5 trillion, going to $33 trillion. It's not going to stop. Tell me, because this is going to destroy. Remember, people are going to look for the higher returns. The deposits are all going to get sucked out of here, particularly the big depositors, because they say, hey, they're paying me 0.9% on my savings account because I'm a grundoon and I can get, I don't know, 2 or 3% here. I'll go ahead and take it. The arbitrage is huge. The deposit is going to set out, and the banking system is going to have a further strain. Phillip Patrick, I want to give people some heads up now. The central banks throughout the world are buying gold in record amounts. The Saudis just cut 1 million barrels a day because they said, guys, we saw what you did with the Biden thing, and look, you're crushing us. This currency is getting more and more devalued over time. You're printing money like crazy. You're borrowing money like crazy. We don't buy into the business model. We're going to go buy as much gold as we can at our central bank, and oh, by the way, we're going to start cutting production because we want it to go to $80 a barrel and more, and we want to husband our resources. Phillip Patrick.
Yeah, it's just an unmitigated disaster. Just to touch upon some of the lowlights that you covered there, we've essentially, McCarthy, the Republicans, we have given now the Democrats carte blanche to spend like crazy for the next 2 years. We've also given all the power to negotiate, put the economy at the forefront of talking points before the next election. So this is White House, the Congress, this is everyone saying, we don't want to fix this. This isn't a problem that we can solve. So we're going to kick the can further down the road and just pretend it doesn't exist. But the reality, it does. And like you said, there are now no constraints on spending. Listen, the CBO, nonpartisan, said that this bill will reduce budget deficits by about $1.5 trillion over the next decade, which sounds great on the surface until you realize that the current year's deficit is about $1.5 trillion. So essentially, it's going to take the next 10 years to offset the debt accumulated this year. This is not a winning proposition. McCarthy lost, the GOP lost, fiscal responsibility lost, and ultimately the American people have lost. As you say, the biggest issue now is what this has led to, right? The view from Beijing, from Moscow, is that the US is weak right now. The view globally of the dollar is starting to dissipate. So what do we have? We have these BRICS nations now teaming together, trading bilaterally outside of US dollars. This is their opportunity, their once-in-a-century opportunity to sideline the US dollar, to create their own economic fiefdoms, their own walled gardens, and they're capitalizing. So what do we have? We have BRICS nations along with 20 other nations trading bilaterally in their own currencies, essentially avoiding dollars. The problem is these BRICS nations are no longer a joke. They have a combined GDP larger than the G7. Look, when President Lula in Brazil says that he goes to sleep every night wondering why the world has to trade in dollars, this is a big problem. Now, is the Chinese yuan going to take over global reserve currency status from the US in the next year or two? It feels very unlikely. But right now, the yuan is 5% of global trade. Every bilateral trade agreement means less dollars, less demand. The yuan is already a viable alternative for a lot of nations because China sells things that the world wants. When it hits 20, 30, 40% of world trade, the dollar at that point has a major, major problem. Look, I'm here in the US. I'm a US citizen. I'm very patriotic. A world run by the Chinese is a frightening proposition. However, you have to think about it. If you're a central banker, you're holding dollars, and you've seen a 15% reduction of that purchasing power in 3 years, it's a problem, right? So yeah, this has been just a massive miscalculation. Like you said,
hit
I think
that again. I want to when and I hate to be so how do I say this politely, blunt about this. One of the problems we have in this country, and one of the great benefits I had as a young man, I always wanted to go to the Pacific. I was studied the World War II in the Pacific very closely as a young person. A lot of the family had been in the service, in WW2, and people that came back from the Pacific, it was just sounded exotic. So I studied. I was lucky to go to San Diego as my naval career started, and then joined the 7th Fleet and take 2 deployments in the Western Pacific and found China and all of it. The one thing is, it's always concerning when I came back to Georgetown and then to Harvard, is that, and then worked on Wall Street and Goldman Sachs, is that New York City, for being a global capital, is quite provincial. And you get to Washington, D.C., and it's very provincial. Yeah, you've got the embassies, you have all these. It's quite provincial. The Atlanticist, the people that think Western Europe, the United Kingdom, the United States, and Canada are kind of the world. This Atlanticist mentality, and you see that in the G7. There's this Atlanticist mentality. The BRICS, when Philip Patrick says the BRICS have a larger GDP in the G7, that is the rest of the world with the resources have a larger GDP than kind of this small, part of the world in Western Europe and the United States, right? Which doesn't make up a huge part of the world's population, but has a lot of accumulated wealth today. But it's all driven by a paper currency called the U.S. Federal Reserve Note. And the BRICS, and this is what I keep telling people, they have plenty of Harvard graduates and plenty of MIT graduates and plenty of Princeton and Wharton School graduates with HP 12Cs, and they can run the numbers. And when they sit there, and the number I want you to give again, how much devaluation, how much depreciation in their dollar holdings have they gotten in the last 2 years because of Joe Biden and the establishment Republicans' policy, sir?
15%. Listen, we feel it. We're individuals. We consume dollars. We feel the effect. But nations around the world are feeling it too, right? 15% loss of your currency that you use for trade, that is significant for a nation. So what have they been doing, right? They've been hedging their exposure. As you mentioned earlier, 2022, the single biggest year for gold buying by central governments in history. Last year, 2022, US dollar holdings amongst central governments at 25-year lows. We are seeing a trend now of de-dollarization. Biden has been playing into the hands of China. He has created this opportunity. It is all about faith. That's what the US dollar is based on. The countries around the world are losing faith. That is the biggest issue we have moving forward. Look, I've said before, this position, global reserve currency, is so important. We have to protect it. If we see a shift away from that, countries never recover, right? You can hear the accent on me. Great Britain, global reserve currency status lost to the US after 1946. Pound sterling has lost over 97% of its relative buying power. This has been played out time and time and time again in history. We cannot lose a grip, because if we do, there is no coming back.
Let me, they sell it as a pound. The pound ran the world. They had the little, remember, all the globes were in pink. You had in the United Kingdom. Remember, when the Guns of August, on that 1 August of 1914, the British Empire, the sun never set on it. It was magnificent in its structure. And quite frankly, the literacy and the wealth they created for the world, they got tons of problems, okay? And the colonialism was not far from perfect. But two world wars that destroyed basically the flower of British manhood. And in 1946, 20-some years later, 30-some years later, after Bretton Woods, when they went off, because they weren't a power anymore, right? When they took the pound and the pound quit being the reserve currency, that was the beginning of Pax Americana. We have seen now from 1946 to today, it's not going to continue. And the burden is, it's our fault. This is not the world's fault. This is not the Saudis. This is not OPEC. A lot of this is in response to irrational and incompetent policy and selfish policy by our elites. You can go back through the history of this, and I hate to say it, but you can mark, we do charts all the time, you can mark a big demise of the United States of America from the day in August 1973 when Richard Nixon over a weekend decided, I think we're going to go off the gold standard. I can walk you through chart after chart after chart. It's kind of the railhead of a lot of bad things that happen and bad decisions. Phillip, just hang over a second. We're going to take a short commercial break. I've got my British friend, now an American citizen, my colleague Philip Patrick from Los Angeles. We're also then going to go to one of my favorite personalities in the world, Senator Antic, out in Australia. You remember him from fighting COVID. Last time we saw him, he was locked up in a hotel. They had him in a lockdown quarantine, and quite frankly, they never wanted him out. Well, hey, he's going to do a tour through Australia with Nigel Farage and Don Jr. That will set the world on fire. We're going to check in with the senator next. Philip Patrick's going to stick with us, talk a little bit about the world's economy and precious metals. Take a short break. Hang around. We'll be back in the room in just a moment.
Barroom Battleground with Stephen K. Bannon.
Phillip, we're going to have you back on next week to go through more about this issue of the $1 trillion Treasury borrowing that's going to affect the bank system. You talked about this for a long time. Deposits start going. We're going to get into the same death spiral we got at Silicon Valley Bank. You'll see the same host of oligarchs looking to get bailed out. Here's what I want folks to do, though. I think, and what we're trying to do here is show you there's an alternative economy, and we're part of the group helping to build it. Stop giving your money to people that hate you, and particularly stop giving your money to people that mislead you. We don't give financial advice here. We do a lot of macro. We don't give you financial advice, but we put you in touch with people that can immerse you in information. This show's about self-reliance, self-empowerment, and human agency. Use your agency today. Please don't miss what the reality of what's going on. The BRIC nations that have the resources, right, have made a fundamental decision. That the elites in the United States are not managing their own business properly, and they're devaluing the currency. And these people, I'm telling you, people say they are not stupid people. They're rational people, just like the illegal aliens, the migrants coming up from the southern border. They are the most rational of all the actors in this, in that. And when they see 15% depreciation of what they have to transact these and have to hold to transact trade and commerce, eventually they're going to sit there and go, there's got to be an alternative. And that alternative is not going to be immediately, but it's going to happen sooner than people think. People started mocking me when we first started talking about this. Oh, this the end of the dollar empire. We started that, I think, thinking about it, Patrick, 2 years ago. Yeah. So I want everybody to go get it. Go to birchgold.com/Bannon and get it. It's totally free. You get the third series. We talk about, because we're entering a phase, as we say, the first chapter, like from the founding of the Republic with the big fights by Hamilton and Jefferson, leading all the way to the rise of the populace with Andrew Jackson, the first president that wasn't from Virginia or Massachusetts. That whole fight was about money and currency. Okay, what is money? What is currency? Who controls it? What is a central bank? We're back to the same thing, and you have to understand it. You need to understand it, not just for yourself, but you need to understand it for your community and for your nation. So go to birchgold.com/Bannon. Phillip, but I also want people to get to you and your advisors there so they can understand about the IRAs, they understand about the tax-free nature of a lot of stuff you guys do. How do they do that?
So it's really simple. They get free information kit. Like you said, information is key. Get educated and solutions will present. birchgold.com/Bannon. Again, birchgold.com/Bannon. They can reach me directly at Phillip Patrick on Getter.
By the way, we ought to do that. If you put the money in gold when we first started partnering with Birch Gold and done the S&P, you can do the math yourself. You can look at the gap, right, and see what went on. So listen, this is only going to get worse because the leadership of this country is more irresponsible, and that's one of the reasons we're like a dog with a bone with these Republicans in the House. So, Phillip, thank you. Thank you for taking time and sticking around with us, brother.
Thank you, Steve. As always, thank you.
So there's been a big announcement. It's catching the political news, and it's all over. Don Jr. and now Nigel Farage are going to Australia for a tour. And when I first heard about it with Don Jr., I said, I wonder if, and then I checked into it, and of course, one of our favorite, not just politicians, but favorite leaders in Australia is in back of it, Senator Alex Antic from South Australia. Sir, last time we left you, Senator, you were locked up. We were trying to get you a jailbreak out of a hotel. I think they had you in quarantine for like 9 months, right? Yeah. Tell us. And by the way, everybody loves Australians. I've been there so many times in the Navy. Other people have such a fondness for the country. We were shocked. We were shocked by the Stalinist methods that went in during the COVID thing. Give us an update and then tell us about this tour. It's Don Jr., it's Nigel Farage, it's yourself in Australia. That's going to be a wild one.
Yeah, well, thanks, Steve. And look, I remember you were going to send me some bed sheets so I could tie them together out the window, but they never came through, so I don't know what happened there. But in any event, we got out of the Medi Hotel. That was a year and a half ago now, and back into the real world. And, you know, Australia, I have to say, around the time of COVID, really started to take a different feel. You know, as I kept saying at the time, you looked out the window and it looked like Australia, but if you looked on the news and saw what was actually happening, it didn't feel like that at all. And we talked about this probably a couple of years ago, that Australia was, of course, a country that wasn't founded having to fight for its freedom like you were in the United States. And I think we're really paying the price for that in some aspects. People here, things have ostensibly gone back to normal. You know, the outside world feels pretty normal. There's not a lot of hangover. We've still got mandates that are, you know, still pushing around, which is a disgrace. But, you know, we're doing our best to try and push back on those. But ultimately, there is an indelible mark that's been left on this country, I think. People now are more compliant. They're more available to be told what to do than they were before. And, you know, states like Melbourne, Victoria, where that you saw most of the images coming out of almost strike-breaking tactics being used against civilians, you know, that is still, I think, feeling the cloud of what happened over COVID. I mean, you know, we're just not simply in the same place that we were 2 or 3 years ago. And, you know, I think we're feeling the effects of it today.
Tell me about that, Scar. I mean, as people, if you read the history of particularly the Australian military in World War I or coming as our ally, you know, the ally in World War II, the whole first part of the Pacific War was to make sure that Australia didn't fall, right? Because if Australia fall, that was a big target. The Japanese have been all over. You look at Vietnam, the Australians have always been there. And there's an image in American mind of the Australian as independent, as self-reliant, as rugged, as can-do, nice personality, nice people, but can-do. How did that happen, and what scar has that left psychologically?
There's a term you might be familiar with. I don't know if it's made its way to the US market, but we in Australia, we talk about larrikinism, you know, the Aussie larrikin. And you think about Paul Hogan or the crocodile hunter or that sort of character. Well, I think we're increasingly seeing the end of that, and it's the long march through the institutions which has grabbed this country. You know, I'm deeply concerned that Australia is now becoming really a vassal state for a globalist movement. And one of the things that's really interesting now is we're dealing with the biggest political issue in this country is this so-called voice to parliament. What's being proposed by the Labor government here is effectively an Indigenous Aboriginal elected voice to parliament, a third chamber, if you like, in our parliament, which is bricked into our constitution. So it's constitutional change. And it's straight out of the UNDRIP United Nations playbook of divide and conquer, separate off Indigenous people from, you know, their colonial settlers, and try and create a division in the country. And I think we're seeing that all across the Western world. But I think Aussies, particularly Aussie men, are a bit beaten down at the moment. I don't think we see the same culture that we saw, that fighting spirit anymore. And we've got to get it back, because ultimately this is a great country. And there's plenty to be said here, and that's why we're looking forward to seeing you know, Don Jr. and Nigel Farage come down and talk to us, because there's so many parallels between, you know, even Nigel Farage, what he did with the Brexit movement, and what we're seeing with this voice to Parliament. It's being pushed by the establishment, it's being pushed by big corporates, it's being pushed by the media, and yet everyday Aussies, I think, are preparing to vote it down. So let's look forward to a Brexit-style, you know, killing off of this nonsense.
Walk us through again, because obviously we were very involved in Brexit. Voice to Parliament. It's a new branch of the legislature. Walk our people, our audience through that. I know there's been a lot of contention with the Indigenous people think some of the newscasters, there's just been this big controversy about one of the newscasters quitting. So walk me through this, and when is the vote going to come up?
Well, it's likely to be in October of this year. At the moment, the legislation that's required to trigger the constitutional referendum. So in this country, changing the constitution requires a referendum, requires a majority of states and a majority of individuals in the country to vote for it. It's a big deal. Constitutional change, like in the United States, just doesn't happen, and it just doesn't happen overnight. Normally, when you get this kind of change, it's debated. You know, our original constitutional development took something like, I think years on end with constitutional debates. But what's being proposed here is to effectively enter into that constitution a paragraph saying there will be an Indigenous voice to Parliament, so an Aboriginal voice to Parliament. Now, we still don't really know what's being proposed here. This is the point about it, is the government here are trying to slip this under the rug, get Australians to vote for it on a guilt basis. You know, you're a racist if you don't guilt. All the BLM tactics that we've seen used in the United States. And effectively change our system so that we have a governing body which can basically stop projects. You know, you'd see this being used to shut down mining, to shut down coal and gas. And, you know, this is a big deal. It's probably the most serious constitutional change that's ever been proposed in this country. Luckily, though, the Australian people, a bit like in the Brexit situation, are understanding that this is not something we want. This is not something that's good for the country. And I think, you know, with a bit more push, it's going to go down. But we've got a long way to go. And this is the sort of incremental creep we're seeing in the country, because from here, and I know this has happened in Canada as well, what we would see if this is passed are treaty obligations, reparations, and then potentially even, I believe, a sovereign Indigenous nation inside our own country. It's classic UN divide and conquer. It's classic radical left divide and conquer. But I think Aussies are going to wake up to this one and are going to shoot it down.
When you talk about Australia as a tool or for this globalist agenda, is this also what you're talking about? Because Australia is a centerpiece for the anti-CCP movement. Australia, you've gone through this huge wave of the CCP trying to come in behind the scenes. A couple of great books, in fact. Your senator, I think, years ago to the House Intelligence Committee, the testimony was explosive. I keep saying that was one of the inflection points when it started to wake people up in the city that, hey, the CCP is moving everywhere. You came very close to having Australia fall to total control of the influence of the CCP. But you're absolutely, if we lose Australia, it's going to be virtually impossible to take on the Chinese Communist Party in the Western Pacific, in Asia.
That's right. Tell me about that. So actually, I mean, really, Australia has led the way in pushing back on the CCP in many respects. There was the shooting down of the Huawei system. I think, if you remember, it was going to be used in the 5G rollout here in Australia, and I think that's taken off in different countries. Now people have understood what the ramifications of that were, but also just the foreign interference laws. Some of the pushback on parliamentary level, when we've seen some really good work from some of our senators here in pushing back on surveillance drones, cameras in offices. You know, parliamentary offices were recently discovered to have been surveilled by Chinese-made cameras. You know, this sort of stuff really matters. So we have been at the tip of the spear on all of this. But, you know, I think this is a different sort of creep. I mean, you know, the push through the COVID period, the incredible lockstep operation that happened in this country, which really was, you know, nothing more of a replica than happened in other countries. But I think we got the worst of it. And we got the worst of it in Melbourne, where, we really saw some heavy-handed military-style tactics being adopted. I think that long march through the institutions, the real global left are making some real inroads in this country. It's why podcasts like yours are so important, because you've got a massive Australian audience, and it's a great privilege to be able to sort of try and reach them, let them understand that there are people fighting back and that there are people that are pushing against this agenda. We just need more and more and more of us to get on board. We need Aussies to start to understand what's happening.
Well, part of that's going to be this tour. Tell me how you conceived it. You've got Don. I mean, you couldn't get two bigger names than Don Jr. and Nigel Farage. Not just big names. I've been so honored to be close to them for a number of years and seeing these guys up close and personal. They can the electricity when they come in, the enthusiasm. These are great speakers, old fashioned, populist firebrands. How did you pull this tour together, and what's the purpose? What are you trying to accomplish?
Well, I mean, I was just asked to be on it, to be honest, and that was a great privilege. I mean, talk about, trailing on the end of two great speakers. It's quite extraordinary, really. But look, it's tickets are available. I think the Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane shows are on the 9th, 10th, and 11th, I think, of July. So I don't know what the ticket sales are in, but you can Google it, trumplive.com, I think, .au. And look, I think people in Australia are looking to hear that populist message. That's why it's been heavily ticketed, and the sales are told are going very well. People want to hear from people that are pushing back on this agenda. And as you say, I mean, Nigel was down last year and made an enormous splash down here talking about his work during Brexit. I think it's so important that Aussies hear this, because really, as I said earlier, what we're going to get, I think, is a carbon copy of the Brexit play that is big business pushing, a globalist elite agenda here in The Voice. And the everyday person on the street, around the dinner tables, around the football clubs, people are talking different language. And I'm really hopeful this is going to be a great victory for everyday Aussies in the coming months. So it'd be great to hear from them, great to hear their experiences. And it's a real honour to be tacked on. This is the real AUKUS, right? Australia, UK, and the US. I'm just, flying the flag for the Aussies on this one.
Well, we're going to cover this wall to wall because it's that big. Give me your concept. How would you see Brexit playing out in Australia? To walk me through how you get your sovereignty back, because clearly something happened along the way that the sovereignty of Australia does not rest with the Australian people. How did that happen, and how do you propose to take it back?
Yeah, look, I think part of the problem is, as I keep saying, this long march through the institutions has been well underway in this country for a long period of time. We lost the schools. It's a similar pattern to the United States. We lost the universities. And the corporate sector now is really, really in charge of much of the messaging, as is the media. I mean, at least in the United States, you have outlets like yourself. We've got a few little minor players here in the alternative media space. There are some people doing some good work, but ultimately, our entire narrative is controlled by the mainstream media. And look, I think the only answer to this is a counter long march, a conservative long march back through the institutions. And I've been doing a lot of that work. I've been trying to bring people into politics, real people, taking politics back from political elites. I keep saying it. We're draining the billabong in this country, and we're doing it bit by bit. But it's a long process, and it involves people first understanding what they're up against, and then second of all, taking time to get involved, because I think Aussies have been very, very complacent with their political system. We're not as politicised as people in the United States. People don't go on school boards and those sorts of things. Everything is getting slowly controlled by a bigger government. And we saw what happened during COVID. I keep saying to people, if you want a glimpse into the future of big government, have a look at what happened during COVID, when our elected politicians gave enormous swathes of power to an unelected political bureaucratic elite. It's a disaster. It always has been. So people have got to take politics back.
Senator, how do people follow you on social media? How do they go to your website? How do they find out more about you?
Twitter, Senator Alex Antic, at Senator Alex Antic. Still running a Getter account with the same address. Instagram, Senator Antic. And of course, if people want to stay in touch with me via email, www.alexantic.com.au. Join the mailing list there, and we keep in touch that way as well, because I'm getting increasingly, you'll find this hard to believe, Steve, I'm getting increasingly stepped on by big tech. Who would have thought?
Senator, thank you very much. Really excited about this. Look forward to covering it wall to wall when you guys are down there. It'll be something.
Thanks, Steve.
Three firebrands. Thank you, sir. Incredible. I keep saying, as long as we got guys like that on our side of the football, we're going to get this done. The people that you meet in this movement, that's why, particularly for some of the older members of our audience, they say, as you get older, your world gets smaller. That's the exact opposite working thesis of the War Room. That's why we put all these opportunities out there. You can join groups, you can go to speeches, you can get online, join Getter, go over to the Midnight Writers over at Carly Bonet and the team, become in the chat rooms. Expand your universe, expand your life. It's all out there in front of you. We're fighting the good fight throughout the world on a global basis. Our audience are the lion-hearted. There's no doubt about that. To be a lion heart, we need you in for the long haul. I got my own Crom, Carmichael, Crom, salty. How are we going to keep them healthy, brother? How are we going to keep that, particularly the bad cholesterol? Tell me how we're going to do it.
Steve, thanks so much for having me on. And I live here in Nashville, Tennessee, and last week we had a 61-year-old state representative who died of a massive coronary. He had what we call the silent killer, and it killed him, and it's a shame. And he represented one of the districts right here in Nashville, and I really want your audience to understand that heart disease is something that just it gets worse over time, and you don't know it's getting worse until you have an event. And it's important, really, really important, to take care of your cardiovascular system, which is what feeds everything into your heart, and then your heart turns around and pumps it back out into your cardiovascular system. And soul tea is a green tea extract that's a super enriched important molecule, theaflavin, that normally resides 1% in green tea, which we know green tea is good for you, but we extract it and make it a 22% concentration in our soft gels, which is the equivalent of 30 cups of green tea a day. And it will improve improve your heart health. Our science shows it helps lower cholesterol, but the main thing is it'll help you live a longer life and a healthier life the entire time. And I started taking our own product 18 years ago. I'm approaching 75. I just had my annual physical, and my blood pressure is still in great shape. My cholesterol is still my bad cholesterol is still under 90, having dropped from 130 18 years ago. And soul tea, and I think soul tea is responsible in large measure for my good health. I try to eat right, I try to walk, take care of myself, but I want to take care of my cardiovascular system. And I invite the posse, and by the way, your group has been enormously responsive to soul tea, and I can't tell you much. I appreciate that. And we do get some wonderful emails telling about how beneficial.
Where do they go to get it?
warroomhealth.com. That's warroomhealth.com. And use the code WARROOM at checkout. You'll get a terrific discount on your first one and an ongoing discount of 3 bottles for the price of 2 on an ongoing basis. Thanks, Steve.
Make sure you go check it out. We're going to be back here live 10 a.m. tomorrow morning. See you then in the War Room.